Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I am Victor Okafor. I'm the head of the Department of Africology and African American Studies here at Eastern Michigan University. We salute our Almighty Father for all his graciousness and abiding love for us. And we salute our human ancestors on whose shoulders we stand today. We especially salute the spirit of Dr. Carter G. Woodson, who in 1926 launched what started as a Black History Week that laid the foundation for what we now routinely observe as Black History Month. Let's not take that for granted. Let us always keep in mind that when we observe the Black History Month, we are actually observing a composite segment of a multi-dimensional American history itself. Let us always keep it in our consciousness that it took an intergenerational struggle for all of us, regardless of our skin pigmentation, to be able to assemble here today. Let's not take that for granted. Remember the age-old aphorism that those who forget their history are bound to repeat their mistakes. I do warmly welcome you to this conversation about the future trajectory of Black politics in our country of the United States. It is our country, and every one of us has a constitutional right to contribute towards our quest for a more perfect union. As you have noticed, we have assembled a distinguished panel of activist political experts who reflect diverse ideological viewpoints. They will lead this conversation with questions from me as a moderator and from you, the audience. But before I introduce our distinguished panelists, let me call your attention to the refreshments on that table. And please feel free to go back and forth and help yourself as the dialogue proceeds. Let me also call students' attention to the fact that today's event is LBC credit approved. And the students amongst us who want to receive that credit should collect and complete an LBC credit form from the table outside. One of our student assistants has some of those forms, and you can pick them, collect them from her. Now, let me introduce the panelists, starting with Attorney Robyn L. McCoy. Ms. Robyn L. McCoy is an attorney, educator, and activist. Robyn, which is her preferred name, is a partner with McCoy and Associates, located in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Robyn has been a practicing attorney since 2001, specializing in criminal defense, family law, educational advocacy, personal injury, and wrongful death. Robyn has been a part-time lecturer at Eastern Michigan University, teaching a class about law and the African American experience. She graduated with honors from the University of Chicago in 1996, where she was mentored by First Lady Michelle Obama during her senior year. Robyn received her JD Law degree from the University of Michigan Law School in 2000. Robyn is a board member of the Michigan Democratic Women's Caucus, vice chair of the National Bar Association's International Law Section, a member at large for the National Bar Association's Criminal and Juvenile Law Section, a past president of the Black Women Lawyers Association of Michigan, a past president of the Vanzetta Hamilton Bar Association, a member of the Detroit Association of Black Organizations Health Disparity Council, and a current director of the NBA Region 6. Robyn has worked as a deputy defender in the Legal Aid Defenders Association in Detroit, Michigan. She has worked as a lawyer guardian, defense attorney, and educational advocate for the Michigan Children's Law Center in Detroit. And Robyn has received several awards for her community service and social justice efforts. She has traveled all over the state, planning, facilitating, and organizing award-winning educational programs on, quote, what to do when stopped by the police, unquote, expungements, how to set aside your criminal conviction, pathways to law school, and how to navigate the public school system. She recently moderated panels on, quote, understanding the crisis in Haiti and the global role of lawyers as social engineers, and effective methods of ensuring peace, accountability, at the National Bar Association's annual conference in Las Vegas in July 2024. She also moderated a panel on how to win a criminal case at the National Bar Association's mid-year conference in Houston, Texas in March 2024. Let's give a round of applause. The next distinguished panelist is Attorney Fancher. Mr. Mark P. Fancher is a human rights attorney, writer, and activist. As the staff attorney for the Racial Justice Project of the ACLU of Michigan, he has challenged police brutality, racial hostility in schools, mass water shutoffs, and abuse of prisoners. He has authored numerous commentaries about U.S. military interventions in the global South, domestic police violence, the criminal justice system, political repression, struggles for the independence and self-determination of Africa and Africa's diaspora, theology, and various issues related to racial justice. He has written several non-fiction books, including I Ain't Got Tired Yet, and a novel, The Negroes of Friends Village. Fancher's life and perspectives are guided by his Christian faith. Let's give him a round of applause. The next distinguished panelist is Mr. Eric Brown. Mr. Eric Brown is a former political blogger for the Detroit News and a staunch independent voter with moderately conservative views. He is a free thinker who is a non-believer of the current two-party system and is cautiously optimistic that a third party is necessary for the black electorate in America to gain political freedom. Mr. Brown has been a third party voter in national elections since 2012 due to what he describes as, quote, the terrible choices presented by the Democrats and Republicans that have been forced upon us, unquote. Mr. Brown is proud to declare that he has never been a card-carrying member of either of the two major political parties of the United States. Finally, Mr. Brown believes that politics matters the most at the local level. Let's give him a round of applause. The next distinguished panelist is none other than Professor Charles Simmons. Professor Emeritus Charles Omawole Simmons is the CEO and founder of the Hush House Black Community Museum and Leadership Training Institute for Human Rights in Detroit. He was a member of the Uhuru Youth Organization and the League of Revolutionary Black Workers in Detroit. Professor Simmons was a United Nations and international correspondent for Muhammad Speaks newspaper and covered the decolonization and liberation movements in Africa, the Middle East, international peace and justice movements, and was a witness for peace in Palestine. Simmons has served in civil rights, Black Power, human rights organizations, and was an assistant to US Congressman John Conyers Jr. He taught at Howard University, California State University, Los Angeles, Eastern Michigan University, and Mary Grove College, graduate program in social justice. He has lectured in Senegal, Belize, and Ghana. Simmons has a Juris Doctor from Georgetown University Law Center and an MS from Columbia University Graduate School of Journalism, where he was an international fellow. He has a BS from Langston University, Oklahoma. His late wife was Professor and Reverend Sandra Simmons of Detroit. He has 3 children and 6 grandchildren. Please, let's give him. Good. Please, thank you for coming. Now, here's the format for this conversation. Each panelist will present a 15-minute position statement on the future of black politics in the United States. Thereafter, I, as the moderator, will pose a few follow-up questions, and after my round of questions, I will invite individual members from the audience to come forward and ask questions for the panelists to answer. So, let's get the ball rolling. Let's start with Robyn.
Okay.
That's how she prefers to be called.
Hello. Okay, I'm going to be loud. Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Attorney Robyn McCoy. I want to thank Dr. Okafor for inviting me to join you for this joyous occasion on this 3rd day of Black History Month. I would point out I am Black every day, not just during Black History Month. I look at this as the kind of like the kickoff, like you have the Chinese New Year. This is the kickoff. I am unapologetically Black, in the word of the Dr. Reverend Freddie Haynes. Despite all the drama and the chaos that is out there, I welcome you all for coming out. So 15 minutes is a long time. I mean, I can talk, but I do want to give folks time for questions. So I'm going to start with, and I'll just say this, I was born and raised in this community. I took Black history classes from Ray Pipkin in this community. I took Congolese dance with Beatrice Congo. When Jeremiah Wright would come into town, my mom would take us to see him. And we would also go to the bookstore. I don't know if any of you are from Detroit, the Shrine of the Black Madonna. And I mean, now there's the new bookstore, or it's not new, but it's the bookstore that's on Michigan Avenue. I go there. So I think as we talk about this concept of the future of Black politics for Black America, we must look at the word Sankofa. I don't know if any of you have seen the movie Sankofa. I was raised on it. My parents, my dad's a lawyer, my mom's a nurse, and they raised me on Afrocentricity. I grew up in Superior Township. I was there for the first 17 years of my life, and I went to a predominantly white school, though. I went to Catholic school, which, shout out to Catholic school. But my parents were like, look, you gonna know that you Black. We're gonna make sure you know that you Black. Don't forget it, and you're going to learn and get the best education, but you Black. And so the word Sankofa is a Twi word from the Akan people of Ghana that means go back and get it. It's a concept that encourages people to learn from their past to inform their future. So when we ask this question about the future of Black politics for America, we must look at the past. And so I would say that when we look at Black people, now my background is cultural anthropology. And I was on the track of pre-law, and then my parents, with their inspiration, particularly my mom, of culture, I was in college and I was taking law classes, and then I went to France, and I just had such a love and appreciation for culture that I switched over to anthropology and the study of man. And when you look anthropologically speaking, you look at Black people, the science is there. We are the original people. We built civilizations in Africa. So it's like a lot of times we start with Black history, we talk about slavery, but we must understand that we built a lot of civilizations. We are the original people, and that's part of why this construct of race was created. We're all human. Because there are some folks out there that are haters. We have some folks that are allies, and all praises be to our allies. And you must understand this too, which I've come to learn, not all skin folk are your kinfolk. Because I've had some situations with some black folks that have been this, like the Willie Lynch effect. I don't know if you guys haven't heard of Willie Lynch, you need to look at the Willie Lynch letter where he talks about, he's trying to tell folks, the slave masters in the South, how to separate the slaves based on race, gender, age, things of that nature. And he's like, if you make these separations, they will do it on their own. And so when I think about this issue of the future of black politics, we must look at what we've done in the past. So we built this country without properly being compensated. You know, Dr. Martin Luther King talks about that in the letter from the Birmingham jail. There's discussions of America owing us an unpaid check. We have made significant contributions to this country, you know, and this country has to atone for its sins, like what it did to the indigenous people. You've had Chinese, you've had other immigrants, folks that have been here, but black folks, we are working class and middle class laborers, you know, and I'm not saying that we don't have other brothers and sisters out there, but I mean, we black, this topic is black history. So we have excelled, and I mean, you go to Africa, you look here through math, science, art, sports, entertainment, you know, we give time and time again to this country, and what do we get in return? What do we get from America? We get mass incarceration. We get the prison industrial complex. We get school to prison pipeline. We get health disparities. We get housing inequalities. We get substandard education system. The list goes on and on. I think that it's imperative that together as a people, we organize and mobilize ourselves for the common goal of advancement of ourselves as a people. As a spiritual people, we must pray for discernment to connect with the right folks that share our common objective for the advancement of ourselves as a people. We must, you know, that's why I said, not all skin folk. So we must understand that, like I've already said, all skin folk are not kinfolk. I need to say it again. Because my parents armed me. When I went into a predominantly white environment, they armed me. They said, look, Robyn, you're going to get out there, you're going to have some people, the white people that are racist to you, but you can't fight every battle. You've got to go, your focus is to go to school. We have students here. Go to school, get your education, be successful. I was born at University of Michigan in the middle of the affirmative action battle. The Supreme Court was looking at our grades. You had those of us that went to predominantly white schools that worked our butts off to get into college. You had those of us that went to black colleges. I'm jealous of those folks. I'm jealous. When I was teaching here, I felt like this is like one of the closest to a black colleges out in this area. EMU, a very fine institution. So I'm in the middle of I'm going to law school, and a law school is a very hard experience. University of Chicago was hard, but University of Chicago, they nurture you, develop you, but when you go to law school, it's a Socratic method, it's predominantly white males, it's a certain kind of culture, just like the legal culture and the medical culture, still predominantly white males, and it's a harsh environment. Lonnie Guinier talks about this in her book, Becoming Gentlemen, which I would recommend to any aspiring attorneys. And so, in terms of the future of Black America, we got to look at people who have discernment to align ourselves with people that have the common vision. We must focus on looking on the answers instead of looking outside and being caught up in the news and all the shenanigans of the white supremacists that are in the White House or in Congress and all of that. We've got to look to our local communities, link up with local people. You have local leaders, you have folks here. I see one local leader right there, raise your hand.
66% of the electorate, black electorate, went from 77% in 2020 to 66%. That's 11% decrease in black support for the Democratic Party. And as I stated, at the beginning of 2024, a poll showed 74% of Americans did not want Joe Biden, 76% of black electors did not want him. And that's your loyal base. Now here are some more interesting numbers when it comes to 2024 in the election results. Georgia in 2020 supported Biden at an 86% rate. 2024, it dropped to 84%. Michigan, 92% in 2020, 90% in 2024. But what's interesting about that is turnout increased in only one of the 9 most populous counties in the state of Michigan. North Carolina, 92% in 2020, 87% 2024. Pennsylvania, 92% in 2020, 89% in 2024. Here's the most startling statistic of them all. In 2020, you had 92% support for the Democratic candidate. In 2024, 77%. Nevada, 82% in 2020, 80% in 2024. So the future of black politics in America rests on a few things that I am not sure the black electorate is capable of, my opinion. Making demands that are attainable and can be benchmarked and tracked. Being so easily distracted that it limits the ability to be proactive, resulting in a trait that causes so many to react on emotions. Leave the identity politics mentality behind. I am not going to vote for someone simply because they are black or have a D after their name. Quit trying to hold the elected with an R after their names responsible, even though you don't vote for them, but you're not holding those with a D after their names accountable. Learn how to reach a common ground with the fellow black man or woman who may have a different political belief, thought, or opinion than yourself. We are all capable of thinking for ourselves, and that has to become the tool used when deciding on who to support. Now, just recently, over the weekend, one of the most staunchest surrogates of the Democratic Party, James Carville, he stated the following. Kamala Harris, or Vice President Harris, was like putting an untested 7th-string quarterback in a starting lineup at a Super Bowl game. These are his words. The problem I had with that is, had a black person said that, they would have been viscerally attacked to damnation by the black community. So we as a people have to do better when it comes to politics. This last election was one of the worst in my lifetime. And I say that because you have family, friends, co-workers, fraternity and sorority brothers and sisters, and even church members that allow an election to come between them. If that is not deep in people to understand, it cannot be more ridiculous that politics proved to be the litmus test that dissolved friendships, which obviously never existed. If there is a future in black American politics, there has to be 3 C's that must be incorporated to black votes to become relevant. The black political dynamic must be about accepting and understanding the politics of politics. Being out in the streets playing hopscotch, jacks, and tiddlywinks just won't cut it. We do not individually make up a large enough voting bloc to make a difference, and we are not making the kinds of financial donations necessary to any candidates or political parties that matter to move the needle forward. It would be incumbent upon us to exist in a political future where we learn to play chess, organize, and not continue to be out-organized. The 3 C's. You must coalesce with each other and find a way to gain favor with other like-minded groups and people. Secondly, we must form coalitions with others and see where those common interests lie to ensure that the best possible candidate or candidates have our best interests, regardless of the letter after their name. Third C, we must adopt a caucus system that will allow our voices to be heard, taken seriously, and understood. Then if we are failed, we too will no longer support the candidate and or the political party that we initially supported. In a nutshell, The future of black politics in America rests on the shoulders of the black electorate, realizing that we cannot do it alone without working with other demographic groups, moving away from identity politics, and respecting each other's political opinion and differences, and uniting as a people for a common goal or cause. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Fancher. Let me preface my remarks by saying that what I offer are my own opinions, not those of my employer or anybody I'm associated with. And I have to do that because I'm a revolutionary. And in this country, being a revolutionary means that whatever you say brings a great deal of heat upon you, and that should not be attributed to anybody that I'm affiliated with. The future of black politics is for black people to withdraw completely from black politics in the way that America defines it. And there's a logical reason for that. We're here to commemorate Black History Month, and if we look at history, then we understand clearly why our future cannot be based on what has been given us historically. This country, the United States of America, is built on lies. It's built on death. It's built on genocide. It's built on enslavement. And there's only a precious few people who are responsible for it and a precious few people who benefited from it. As he was leaving office, former President Biden said that he wanted to caution America about the establishment of an oligarchy that was taking over the United States. The man was way off base because the oligarchy has been here from the beginning. It's an oligarchy that started this thing. It was a small white elite group of men who came together, white men with property, who said that we're going to put together something that we're going to call a nation. And it's really going to be a device, a mechanism for us to make ourselves richer at the expense of masses of people. And so, as quiet as it's kept, the exploitation and the oppression of people in this country has not been limited to the indigenous nations whose territory was stolen from them. It was not limited to just the people who were enslaved in Africa and brought here to do the work. It was also the exploitation and oppression of white workers, poor white workers, because the vast masses of them did not have the kind of wealth and money that this precious little elite group had. And they exploited them, and the way that they exploited them is they created for them a set of lies that they believed and that they still believe. They believed that their interests, that their natural affinity, even though they were dirt poor, that they were working from sun up to sundown in textile mills and in factories and in other plants and in the fields, even though they were being exploited and oppressed, that their natural affinity and alliance was with this rich group of elite white people. And they drove a wedge between them and their true allies, the enslaved Africans and the indigenous peoples, by telling them that inherently they were inherently they were superior to them. The doctrine of white supremacy took a firm hold on their minds, and it remains to this day. And they were also given a certain degree of white privilege in the sense that they were promised that they would never be at the very bottom of the caste system in this country. And that they had something that other people did not have, which was the prospect of upward mobility. That these indigenous people, that these enslaved people would always be at the bottom, and that they could always count on one thing, that there would always be somebody beneath them, and they would always have an opportunity to rise. And so when this has been put to a lie, when you see in Reconstruction, when enslaved Africans came out of Reconstruction fired up and ready, I mean, they've been set free, and they had the opportunity now to learn how to read. Give me a book and let me learn how to read, and I will show you how to do things. They went into politics. They populated the South Carolina legislature to the point that they dominated it. There was a black lieutenant governor. There were black people in the U.S. House of Representatives and in the Senate. And they established themselves economically. You know, we've heard about all of the gains that were made economically in terms of the establishment of businesses and other things. And these white workers looked at this and they felt very cheated. And they said to themselves, somehow, this is not according to the script. We must retake America. We must make America great again. And the way that they did it is by putting on white sheets. and riding on horses and setting fire to people's homes and lynching people and doing things. That's the way they made America great again. And if you're not careful, they're going to do it that way one more time. So we must understand the dynamic that has existed in this country from the very beginning. That this country was never designed to include black people as part of the political equation, only to the extent that they could be used to the advantage of those who were part of the oligarchy. If you look at Article 1, Section 2 of the Constitution, it makes reference, passing reference to enslaved Africans as 3/5 of a human being. That was not for the benefit of the enslaved Africans, it was for the benefit of the planters who owned them. Because when they looked at congressional apportionment and they looked at the representation that they were going to get as Southern planters in a very sparsely populated area of the country as compared to the more densely populated urban areas, then they said, hey, it's not fair, we should get more representation. They said, well, just count those black people that you own as 3/5 of a human being. They don't get to vote. They don't get to participate, but you count them for purposes of apportionment. Use them because you own them. And then at a later point, when Dred Scott decides to come before the US Supreme Court and make his case for why, because he went into a free state, he was free, the Supreme Court affirmed what everybody knew in the most explicit terms. They said, black people were never intended to be part of the United States of America. You don't even have the right to come in here and tell us that you think that you have an opportunity to become part of the United States of America. And this sent a loud and clear message to all of those white workers all over the country that, look, black people have no place in this country, they have no place in its politics, they have no place, they have no opportunity, and they were correct. Because in the years that have followed, notwithstanding the evolution of the legal structure, notwithstanding amendments to the Constitution, notwithstanding civil rights laws, every possible thing has been done to block black participation in politics. During Reconstruction, we made reference to the fact that the Night Riders and the Klan came in and they terrorized black people, and then they drove them out of the offices that they occupied. During the long period of Jim Crow, we saw terrorism and lynching used, but we also saw the birth of things like literacy tests, okay, and other means and methods of excluding people. And we've seen in recent years use of voter suppression. We've seen the evisceration of the Voting Rights Act, most notably in Shelby versus Alabama. And in a number of different ways, they've tried to prevent and exclude. But what we have to keep in mind, and this is the point that I think is frequently missed, is that even if we were able to right those wrongs, even if we were able to reform the system in a way that allowed for full participation of black people in the political process, it would be a game that would be rigged, and it's a road that leads to nowhere. Because the oligarchy that started this whole thing understood from the outset that they were going to be oppressing and exploiting everybody. And what they also understood is that there was going to be resistance to that oppression and exploitation, especially if people woke up. And they built into the system, built into the process, a way to ensure that they would always control the politics of this country. And the way that they did it is they created an illusion of democracy. They gave you two parties. They gave you the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. And they said, if you don't like one party, vote for the other one. If you want to change things, get involved. This is the way that you participate politically. But the truth, if you look at both of those parties, you will see that there is not a dime's worth of difference between the two of them. The only ways in which they differ are in matters concerning birth, death, marriage, and sex, and other social issues. The oligarchy, the multinational corporations, the rich families, the billionaires, and all those people that are hanging around with Donald Trump right now, all of them could care less about the social issues. And they say to the Democratic Party, whatever you want to do, whatever position you want to take on those issues, whether it's gay marriage, whether it's even civil rights, whatever positions you want to take, you take those positions to distinguish yourself from the Republican Party, because that helps us, because we don't care about any of that. The only thing that we care about is controlling the nation's wealth. The only thing that we care about is the construction of empire and the maintenance of it. The only thing that we care about is the military machine that we can use to make sure that we continue to control the nation's wealth and to continue to build the empire. You can have everything else. And meanwhile, we stupidly go around thinking that the way forward for us is to figure out how to win offices within this little structured system that they've created. It's stupid, because we know that the only thing that we're going to be able to accomplish is maybe reform of a few social issues, but when it comes to what really matters, which is liberation of people who've been oppressed, when it comes to ensuring human rights, when it comes to ending wars that wipe out thousands and thousands of innocent lives in Gaza, when it comes to those things which are most important, we can control none of it as long as we stay within the political system that has been developed. And so if you want to know in a nutshell about the future of black politics in this country, if black people are intelligent, the future will be getting out of the political process and constructing a new political reality that will guarantee liberation for us. There are a number of different pathways to it, because if we understand politics, we understand that the essence of politics is power and controlling. And power comes not from winning electoral offices, it comes from controlling the resources that everybody in the world wants. And the resources that everybody in the world wants are located on the continent of Africa. And we don't know it, but the multinational corporations sure enough know about it, because they've gone to great lengths to lock it down and control it, even to the point of using the military-industrial complex to militarize Africa to make sure that no Africans actually take it. So if we want to use our energy in a way that makes sense and is intelligent, we will focus our energy on getting the resources of Africa and putting those resources in the hands of African people. If we want to talk about what makes sense to us politically, it's recognizing that the enemies of African people globally are the enemies of many oppressed people around the world. Those people who are dying in Gaza right now are our allies. Those are the people who are resisting Zionism, which is a cynical, vicious system that has been constructed to advance the interests of empire, and it must be destroyed. Because when we destroy imperialism, when we destroy Zionism, when we destroy capitalism, we liberate humanity. And it must become the highest priority for anybody who is serious about freeing the people. Our allies, the people that we fight with, are all of these people throughout the global south. Everybody who's oppressed, we come into alliance with them, we come into working relationships with them, and once we do that, once we assemble that in the way that Huey Newton instructed us with his theory of revolutionary intercommunalism, it is at that point that we will have a future, not only in black politics, but a future for black humanity. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'd rather walk on high poles barefoot than have to come behind these brothers and sisters here. But good afternoon. I'm happy to be here, and thanks to Professor Okafor, Chair. I was at, I'm 83 years old, and I was at Eastern for 17 years, ending about 7 years ago, I think. And I taught I was in the English department, but I taught journalism and law. And during that period, we started the Hush House Black Community Museum. And they got the name because we had a youth newspaper called Hush Your Mouth. And they used to meet at our place often, and so the students started referring to it as the Hush House. But we welcome students to come there It's a small museum, and our emphasis really on the resistance to oppression, not simply looking at the achievements, although that's very important, but we're also looking at the resistance to oppression and throughout American history, and looking at the connections with the global struggles. So my emphasis, my focus now is on the international, the U.S. foreign policy, which is really left out of much of the discussions, unfortunately, about our condition and our way forward. And it's so important because, and it's not taught in school really. I mean, we teach the part that's in the books is okay, but there's so much of it that's secret. And even if it's not officially secret, it operates in a very secretive way. So it's extremely difficult to find out what the policies are unless you have people on the ground who can tell you, because the establishment media is not about telling the truth. It can't. And now they're good, very good journalists, but the journalists don't control the organizations. The people who own the media are the same people who are in the imperialist gang who dominate and who are causing all the problems in the world. And they own our media, so we have to trust them to tell us the truth. So that's why we are really so ignorant as a people about what's happening in the world. It's not our fault exclusively, but it takes a lot of time and effort to dig this stuff up. One of the problems of looking at the international affairs, and that's where the military comes in. And when we talk about the military, the trillions of dollars that we spend on the military takes away from the domestic needs of health, education, and welfare, and the housing and everything that we need in the city. We can't pay for the floods. We can't pay for the poisoning of the water in Flint and all around the country. We can't pay for decent education. We can't pay for most of the stuff that most places in the country needs because the money's going for these wars under the umbrella of their whole military-industrial complex. But going way back, at the beginning of this empire, the original U.S. foreign policy was to steal the land and to steal the people who made up the capitalist system. And so we changed that policy with the Civil War, beginning with the Haitian Revolution and continuing with the American, the Civil War. We ended the slavery, but we didn't change foreign policy at all. The foreign policy is the same as it was during the slave period. We have to keep that in mind. And so their objectives in the State Department is not peace. It's to steal and rob and rape and control and dominate. That's all they're concerned about. And the media gives it a public relations front to make us think that they're doing something about peace and justice. And so that has to be known. So we stole the land. I say we, the government, they stole the land, all the land we're on. We're sitting on land right now. They've stolen, there's a lot of blood wherever you're standing in this country. People who they raped and robbed, pillaged. That's American domestic and foreign policy. Now, I was born in 41, during, at the beginning of World War II. And I remember the soldiers coming back, going and coming from the war. My grandparents, who raised me, were activists. My grandfather was in the trade union movement, which just became legal in 1941. And because before that, and that brings up the whole New Deal of the 1930s, workers had no rights. There's factory workers, agriculture, whatever type of labor you were doing, you had no rights. There was a 12-hour day. So we fought to get the 8-hour day, and that became a part of the New Deal of Roosevelt. If you went to work and got your hand cut off, they wipe off the blood, put somebody else there. There was no health medical benefits. That didn't exist. You worked until you were as old as I am, and there was no retirement benefits. You just worked until you dropped. There was no sick care. There was no vacations. There was no Sunday off. There was no overtime pay. There was none of these things that we just take for granted now. All those benefits are a result of the workers' struggles during the 20s, well, ever since this, even in the abolition movement, people were talking about fighting for an 8-hour day. That goes way back. But it didn't become, it wasn't implemented until after World War II as a result of the New Deal. So it wasn't that FDR was such a nice guy and gave us these benefits. Workers forced that on, workers and the civil rights leaders forced it on FDR. So they had no choice. So he went to his friends who were all Wall Street, all of the Wall Street buddies, and said, look, if you don't pay up the taxes to pay for it, because they hired 12 million people during the Depression. And the rich folks had to pay for it. He told them, if you all don't pay for it, he was in the Wall Street crowd himself. He said, if y'all don't pay for this, they're going to overthrow the government. You ain't going to have a damn thing. So you better cough up this 90%. So we did get benefits. But the right wing at that time, in the mid-1930s, they said that the New Deal was communist and that they swore that they were going to get rid of the New Deal, and they began organizing way back then to accomplish what we see being done today. This has roots, deep, deep roots. So don't think that we got something because capitalism gave it to us, because the political structure gave us something. We've had to fight every step of the way to get whatever we've got. Jumping ahead with the foreign policy, my grandmother taught me to read poetry and recite poetry during the war, during World War II, and I was talking to community audiences in the church, and I could see and this poetry was about, going back to the abolitionist period, it was talking about racism in the military, both in the First and Second World War. As Gerald Horne pointed out, we call these world wars, First and Second World Wars. They're actually European tribal wars that they drug everybody else into it, made them participate. But these were European tribal wars. The troops said, I heard them, they said, we were fighting more among the black, there was more fighting going on between the black and white soldiers than there was between the U.S. Army. There was a black army and a white army fighting whoever the enemy happened to be. And so that was the situation throughout the First and Second World Wars. Now, immediately after that's over, I was surprised because we jumped into another war in Korea. Immediately, the ink wasn't dry on World War II, and we started another war. And I was asking the GIs the young men who I knew, my neighbors, cousins, relatives who were going to Korea, why were we fighting in Korea? I just wanted to know what the reason was. And they didn't know. And so later on, I had a class in high school, my senior year, and I think it was a civics class or something, but we talked about the Korean War, and I learned that we were fighting in Korea for peace and justice and democracy and truth and all of these nice things. I accepted that. I didn't have any alternative information. And the next year, I joined the Air Force. Well, I joined the Air Force immediately after high school. I was 17. And I overheard guys talking about, now these were veterans, some of the veterans who were in the Air Force at that time, they had been in World War II and in Korea. And they were talking about how they got beat up in Korea and got their ass kicking. And I said, well, that can't be, because this is what I just read, a few months ago. And they laughed at me so hard, they fell out on the floor laughing at me, telling them what I learned in school. And I was pissed. I said, I felt betrayed because what I had studied was incorrect. And so I started doing my own interviews with the GIs, the older guys, about where they had been, what they were doing, wherever they were. What was the purpose of this war? What's the purpose of that war? What were you doing? Usually they didn't know. They were generally told to say, well, this is what we're doing, what we're told. But those who could tell me something, it always contradicted what the government said. And so then I concluded, well, I got to get started from scratch, learning everything, because I've just been lied to totally, and that put me on the path of investigating. And at the year that I went in, we had the Cuban Revolution, the Algerian Revolution was going on, the Vietnam War was still a secret, and they were they were actually recruiting young GIs my age to go to Vietnam to fight in secret, and they said we were wearing civilian clothes, so we were officially born in war. And the incentive to go to Vietnam was you would get hazardous duty pay of $50 a month. You would get more promotions by being in a war zone, and you could get all the women you wanted. This is what we were told to encourage us to go to Vietnam. And I said, well, what? And I had just left Mississippi. I was in Mississippi for a year, 59, and I was there when the Simmons started. And I was just so angry after that experience. And I told my other young GIs, we were sitting in the chow hall, I said, you can't even eat a hamburger here without fighting the white folks, and you're going all the way to Vietnam to fight somebody else you don't even know. And of course, I had been in now over 3 years, and when this came up. And so I was called in before the commander, and a long conversation. He said, well, I understand you said you won't fight for your country. I said, I really hadn't thought about it like that, but I guess you're right. And so I don't want to fight in Vietnam or Cuba. And but he said, well, you don't have the right to decide what you're going to do in the military. This is not a democracy. You do what you're told, or you go to jail. And so he told me to put it in writing. So I wrote down something very nebulous. I quoted Martin Luther King and Thoreau, which I'd rather not do this. I didn't say I refused. And I really didn't understand the totality of what I was getting into. I was just doing it out of anger, and I felt that I was right. I wrote letters to my grandfather, who was in the UAW here in Detroit, and Charles Diggs, who was the congressman in Detroit at the time. And I wrote a letter to the preacher at King Solomon Baptist Church, where I was a member. And he had been a very strong civil rights advocate, although he's a Republican. He was a Lincoln Republican. And the minister denounced me in the pulpit, said I was being unpatriotic. I didn't hear from Diggs, but I'm glad I did write him, because that made the military folks reading my mail assume that I knew somebody, which I didn't. And my grandfather, though, he said he talked to the union men, and they said that I should do what I thought was right. And that gave me the courage and the incentive to just move forward and to refuse or whatever. Anyway, when Kennedy made the speech about the October and November crisis in Cuba with the Soviet Union, I got discharged shortly after that. And I came back to Detroit and joined, and I went to Wayne beginning in January '63, and we started an organization called Uhuru, which preceded the Black Panther Party by about a year or two, but it was the same, we had the same ideas. Although our focus was more on the trade unions and the labor environment, because we all came out of labor families. Most of our families worked in the factories. And we, as students, worked in the factories also. My habit was to work for a semester in the factory. I quit and go to school for a semester, that sort of thing. And the jobs were so plentiful at that time, and it was hard for young people not to believe that. But you could quit a job in the factory in the early '60s and then go and get another one. It wasn't no big deal, because we were still a major manufacturing center. This was before the downsizing and the outsourcing and all that, and the globalization. That organization evolved into the League of Revolutionary Black Workers, which was exclusively focused on the trade unions, the United Auto Workers and other trade unions, looking at the conditions of black workers specifically, but also the whole the labor environment. And we took a position against capitalism and imperialism. We supported the liberation movements. I was in a group within Uhuru in 1964, who traveled to Cuba, and we got to meet Fidel Castro and Che Guevara, Robert Williams and Mabel Williams, who fought the Klan in North Carolina. And so that took me on, that furthered my interest in international affairs and the struggle against injustice. I had the opportunity to go to, I worked for the Associated Press first, when I first got out of Langston University. And the media, my media experience beginning there and with the establishment media, one of the first examples encounters I had was writing a story about the integration of the police departments, the desegregation of police departments. You know, all the police in the country were white. I mean, except they would have about 1 or 2 black persons. In some cities, we had 1 or 2 black cops. But they couldn't arrest white people. They couldn't testify in court, none of that. So they could only brutalize black people. But when they started integrating the police force, because the white cops didn't like that, and there were fights. There was fights all the time in the police department between black and white cops in the beginning. And so on this occasion, there was a shootout in Philadelphia between black and white cops in the station. The white cops had arrested a black guy and were beating him up in the station, and the black cops intervened, and so they got into a fist fight, and that evolved into a shootout. So I was taking the story over the phone in New York, and I was typing and said, wow, this is quite a story. So I looked over my shoulder, and my supervisor was looking down at what I was typing, and he said, you can't write that. And I thought, well, this is some serious news. I've been to Columbia University Journalism School, been qualified for everything they taught me. And so, but I looked at his face, and his face said, if you do it, you're out of here right now. And so I learned that lesson quick, and I decided from that point on to just send anything that was controversial racially, to send it to the black press. And so that became my practice. I never even tried to get any more. And I noticed that there was an annual conference of editors and publishers that the Associated Press had. The Associated Press at that time was one of the largest media organizations in the country. And this was during the rebellions in the late 60s. There were about 120 or more rebellions all around the country. Y'all call them riots. There was a meeting in Florida, I think, and I was getting notes on the teletype about what they were saying. And so one of the things that they came up with was, do not report on the rebellions that happened outside of the original area. So if there was a riot in Chicago, you wouldn't find out about it in Detroit. If something happened in Detroit, they wouldn't know about it anywhere else, unless you had personal connections and you found that in some other. Later on, you found out about it. But it was an attempt to just censor everything. That helped me, that clarified, because I didn't have much trust in mainstream media anyway, but that really solidified it. So I continued with Muhammad Speaks. I was hired by Elijah Muhammad to write for the newspaper that Malcolm X had organized. And I got to covered the liberation movement in Southern Africa, in Angola, Mozambique, Guinea-Bissau, and I saw what the United States was doing everywhere. If the United States wasn't there, specifically, they would be financing the other European powers to do the dirt. They would be financing Israel to do it. So Israel was doing the dirty work of the United States since 1948. I mean, that's not new. So the Israelis were basically carrying out the genocidal policies that the United States endorse or leads. And the United States policy, and I want to go back to the end of World War II again. Coming out of World War II, the military-industrial complex, people decided that our policy from now on is going to be to have full spectrum dominance. Full spectrum dominance. Remember that. Full spectrum dominance. That means you're going to control everything on the planet. Now, you know, we're always talking about how somebody else wants to rule the world and all this. This is U.S. policy to dominate the world in every geographical space, in every physical space, politically, economically, every method that you can think of. We must have dominance. And so that is where we are now. We're fighting how many wars? I don't even know. Probably a dozen. And the United States is involved in each conflict. Not only involved, but we are the cause of the problem. Because when I went in the military, I was thinking that the purpose of the military was to defend the country. I thought that was cool. I wasn't nonviolent. But I thought that we would be doing service to the country, to protect the borders. Well, I found out that what we are actually doing is causing the problems that lead to war and injustice everywhere. So that is U.S. foreign policy. So we don't know a damn thing about what's going on unless we have independent media, independent sources. I don't know how my time is. Let's see. Now comes BRICS. Brazil, Russia, China, India, South Africa. Because the colonized countries have not just been sitting around holding on their thumbs. They have been actively organizing ever since they have been colonized. Ever since people were enslaved, they started fighting immediately and organizing. So their position is that we don't want to be slaves. We refuse to be slaves anymore. We didn't have much choice coming out of World War II because we were still barefoot and pregnant. That was the policy. It was the foreign policy was to keep the darker people barefoot and pregnant, and the domestic policy was keep the nigger down. These were, and I used to hear those slogans all the time as a child. The BRICS nations have already, their objective is to escape the U.S. and Western-dominated financial system which keeps them oppressed. You can't, if you have $1 billion in your pocket, I won't sell you a factory or anything that's going to help you in economic development. I'll sell you entertainment centers and, football stadiums and stuff, but I'm not going to sell you anything that's really going to help you to develop your country. Now, BRICS is different. BRICS, the intention of BRICS is to help all the countries develop. And they see it as a win-win outcome, not simply I'm losing something. Because the Western countries see it as I'm losing something if I help you. That is not the value system that is among the BRICS countries. And the BRICS countries is growing rapidly. The countries are standing in line to join BRICS. They're going to be using their own currency and bartering. And so we're going to have a completely different financial system. How long will this take? Who knows, because it took the European Union, about 15 years to get theirs together. But they're moving rapidly, and that means they're not going to need the US dollar anymore. And it's not against the dollar, but they want to have a system that works for them, and I would say for people of the global South in general. The United States position is that, we're going to crush BRICS. We're going to put tariffs on anybody, 100% tariffs. And that's all they have. They have nothing to offer the countries of the global South except high interest rate loans that cannot be repaid and warfare. And the threat that if you don't cooperate with me, I'm going to kick your ass, I'm going to destroy your country, I'll overthrow you, I'll assassinate you. This is the U.S. Western policy. So we're in the midst of a major transformation globally that neither political party is prepared to handle. They don't even understand what BRICS is. They don't think that far ahead. The Chinese are thinking about, they got a plan, the Belt and the Silk Road, it's a plan for 100 years. We don't even think beyond, American corporations don't think beyond the next board meeting to report how much profit they're going to make. So that is what we are faced with right now, a totally new world situation which has not been discussed among the public. The American empire is declining, and so we need to know how are we going to adjust to this new situation. The Western European countries are in a state of decline, while the global South is rising. So black folks need to decide what side are we on? Are we going to continue with the slave master, or are we going to jump ship? Now, that's what we're faced with. And so in discussing about what the new politics is going to be, those are the issues that are on the table now. That Trump, it's not Trump alone, so people will get fixated on Trump. These ideas that people are espousing have been moving along all the time, ever since the 20s and 30s. It's not new. And many politicians have the same ideas as Trump. They're just afraid to say it openly because they won't get reelected. But the Trumpism is a dominant force that is going up against a new brick wall. And it is very dangerous. I'm not going to play that down. We're in a very dangerous situation. But we have to build more unity. And I have some ideas about how, what we can also do. We need think tanks in every community to wrestle with these issues. And so I'm going to leave it there. And again, thank you for your time and this extremely important gathering with this new world situation that we have faced. And this is not being discussed by Democrats or Republicans. And keep in mind that the same people who own the Republican Party, the military-industrial complex, they own the Dems also. So we need a third party, as our brothers here are saying. We need a third party. Now, one of the problems with the third party is that they generally wait too late to start organizing. They wait until the presidential election. We need to start today organizing for the next 4 years. So that's my 2 cents. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, panelists, and let's give them another round. Remember, I told you that a dynamic panel, distinguished panel. Now, I have a few questions for our panelists, and thereafter, I will invite you to pose questions as well. I will start with the following question. Political pundits have profiled a variety of reasons why the Democratic Party lost the November 2024 presidential election. In your view, what were the factors that caused that loss? In November 2024, Mr. McCoy wrote an article in which he argued that, quote, "lost for white privilege killed the Democratic Party," unquote. So if you were to advise the Democratic Party, what would you have the Democrats do differently the next time around? Conversely, if you were to advise the Republican Party, what would you suggest as a means by which the Republicans could win more votes from African Americans and other voters of color? You can answer that in any order.
As far as the Democrats, I would advise them to pay attention to the tea leaves. The facts are out there with regards to not wanting number 46 to stay number 46. I will also advise them to not use a person to use a demographic group. And what I mean by that, Vice President Harris, because of her zeal for the position, allow herself to be used, and in turn, the Democratic Party as a whole used the black electorate. Because there was a threat from a large percentage of female elected officials that if she were to be bypassed, then they would not have support of the black female base. But one of the things that bothered me most about the 2024 election is that I asked numerous people that looked like me, what was it about Vice President Harris that was different from her previous attempt to run for president? And people have selective memory because when she dropped out of the race in December 2023, she had a 3% approval rating. So how in the hell did she become that person in July of 2024? And I'm just being real, so I never got a cogent response from anyone. You know, we were not giving her money. Polling showed we were not supporting her. And we just can't keep allowing a boogeyman to spread fear on why we're supporting someone just because they have a D after their name. You know, she didn't earn my vote in 2020. And people got mad at me because a featured article in the New York Post on July 23rd that I was the headline respondent from the journalist that did the article, and I said it then, she was not going to win. And to the Republican Party, going forward, they have some inroads, no matter how people want to look at it. The fact that in 90% of all the counties in America, not just in Michigan, 90% of all the counties in America, even in the counties where Vice President Harris won, there was a shift in the reduction of votes from the Democratic Party. So they have a lot of work to do, and then they just had an election over the weekend for the new leadership of the Democratic National Convention, and I would implore anyone to go take a look at a picture of those that won. You tripping on the cabinet of Donald Trump? Look at that picture.
Yeah, right? Look at it. Seriously, you should.
Yes, well, I will say this as a card carrying Dem, but I'm black, I'm a woman. I want to respond to what Brother Brown had said about Kamala. Kamala ran for office. She stepped out, but there were the forces in the Democratic Party that they pressured Biden to pick, not only have our first black woman on the U.S. Supreme Court, but also a black VP. So there is the, what I will say in America is what happened with Kamala, I read her book, I met her, more than qualified to be president. Some would say she has been the president, okay? If you want to be real, she was the president. More than qualified, but she was set up for failure. And why? She was set up for failure by the Democratic Party, okay? So I'm here to tell you, I ran for office. I have been dedicated and loyal to the Democratic Party, but the Democratic Party is not always loyal to us. To those of us that are in the Democratic Party. One of the things that my dad has always said, my dad's an independent, and he said, you go out there, you engage with people, and you look at people, and white, black, whatever they are, and you let people show you how you support them if they support you. So to this point about, I want to bring it back historically. The Japanese after World War II, what they did is they joined the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, they had independence. I think as a people, in order to move forward, I would agree we shouldn't put all our eggs in the red team or the blue team. We need to have representation everywhere. Now realistically, this thing about independence, yes, I've lived in other countries. I've lived in France. I've been in South Africa. They might have 5 parties, 7 parties. America, we still have this whole red-blue thing going on. I don't know how much sway we're going to have. I mean, yes, the independent parties will affect the elections, but we still have this blue-red thing going on. I have family on the blue team and the red team, and I think it's important that we come together as a people and look at what are these issues, like right here. Like we just had former Washington County Commissioner Ricky Jefferson was in here, who is a minister, who is committed, people like that, who committed to helping people, because I understand about what Attorney Simmons is saying about the international piece. That's why I'm on the NBA International Law section, because we're looking at the crisis in Haiti. Why do they want to keep Haiti down? Because that's one of the first places where you had independence of America, the Haitians, and they don't want to have us have that concept that we can have independence and liberation. So they want to keep Haiti down. We've been focusing on what's happened in the Ukraine and Israel. Well, we have black people in our backyard. The Haitians helped contribute to our nation. There are Haitians here that have made us a success. I traveled over the holiday. I was in Florida. You see immigrants that are contributing to our society. You see in New York, you see, and they want to deport everybody. Okay, they deport everybody, but who's going to do the work that black and white folk aren't going to do? Who's going to do the work? Who's going to do the work? We have these terrorists. When you go to the grocery store, the price of eggs, you have people that voted. Lyndon Baines Johnson talked about with the whole mind trick that and I know this is what Attorney Fancher talked about too, is that you have the mind trick that the rich elite put on the poor whites. They don't understand. It's a quote about while they're out there worrying about racial politics, we're going to be better than the black people, that the rich white man is picking their pocket. That's what's happening right now. The pocket, you're about to have your pockets picked. It's about the rich and the poor. But what I want to say to folks that are here, what can you do? We all have a purpose. And Toni Morrison she talked about how you don't want to have this racism distract you from that purpose. We all have a reason for being here. You can run for office. You can run for you can run for school board. You can run for city council, trustee. We have what we want to look at really, red team, blue team, whoever it is. We have right now in Michigan, we have a Detroit mayor's race. We have Gary Peters has bounced. Now you got people vying for the U.S. Senate spot and the governor's race. So the question that we want to look at, because I have not been all that happy with some of the things that have happened in the Democratic Party. I will say this, the governor has been progressive about putting in black judges, so that's been, but then we got some drama going on with racial profiling of the judges that we need to be looking at. The Michigan Supreme Court has requested an audit, but you look at, where is the leadership in Michigan? Some people look at Detroit and Michigan as like little Africa. Where is the leadership? When we talk about the race for Secretary of State in Michigan, for Attorney General, where are we hearing about the black candidates or progressive candidates? I know they're talking about Pete Buttigieg and Jocelyn Benson. How many black people do they have in their office? What have they done to advance black people? That's the question. We're right on the precipice, and we don't need to fall for the okie doke, which is what the brothers here have talked about. We don't need to fall for the okie doke, because we had the redistricting issue, and when I was running, they redistricted, and they wanted to have a Democratic majority, and they said to we ended up losing our black Congresswoman Brenda Lawrence, and they said some of the elites in the Democratic Party said, well, it's better if you have a Democratic majority. So what, that you're sacrificing having blacks in position of leadership? It's like a white liberal trope. We can represent black interests. No, black people can represent black interests. They're progressive people that can represent black interests. So in real time right now, we have to not fall for the okie doke. We cannot. You have Duggan that is running for independent for governor. All these folks that are, and then what happens? I see time and time again. Like they get black folks to put out there to run, and just so they can get white folks in positions. They promise you. They say, if you run, we're gonna give you some money, like they did with my mentor, Judge Deborah Thomas. They had a runner for the Michigan Supreme Court and Godfrey Dillard. They get black folks out there. So I think when we talk about these parties, there needs to be a revolution, not only in the Democratic Party, but in the Republican Party and the independents across the board. And we as black Americans, as Americans, got to come together and lift each other up and not fall for the politics. It's messy. I I ran because I'm always promoting women running for office. I engage with young people. I talk to them in the high schools and the middle school, because it's really you guys are the young folks that are gonna have to fix the mess that have been created by the adults. It's a hot mess. And it's unacceptable. I mean, when I was younger, I was able to do things and advance, and younger people should be able to have that opportunity as well. They should not have the grown-ups messing everything up. It's just a hot mess. So I think there needs to be a revolution, but young folks, pay attention. People, do they live up to what they say? When these politicians come in and they say, we want you to vote for us, what are their stats? What are their, what are they actually, are their words actually lining up with their actions? Are they just coming in when they want your vote, or are they with you all the time to address your needs and concerns?
Okay, good. Look, at this point, let me just recall that in November, Mr. Fancher wrote a powerful article. And in that article, he argued that, quote, lust for white privilege killed the Democratic Party. And I'm giving him an opportunity to expound on that, to educate us on what he meant by that.
Yeah, as a person who really works hard to destroy both the Democratic and the Republican parties, far be it from me to give them advice about how to win elections. I also, just for the record, I don't support the creation of a third party either, because the whole system is corrupt. The whole thing needs to go. But I'm gonna give the advice only because I know that they won't take it. And the roots of the problem, from their perspective, start back in the 1960s. After Dr. King was assassinated and the movement for black liberation moved into the black power phase, those who advocated black power went to the white activists who had been active with that movement and said to them, look, we got the black community covered. We're gonna organize there and we're moving for black power now. What we need for you to do as white activists is to go into spaces where we cannot go. Go into those white communities, those white working class communities, and explain to them that we are not the enemy, that we have shared interests, that we should really be working cooperatively and in alliance with each other. And the white activists, unfortunately, it's a tragic, tragic error. They did not hear it, they did not want to hear it. They said, look, we come down and we fight, we shed our blood for the civil rights movement, and now you're kicking us out of the black power movement? I mean, we're gonna do our own thing. Many of them got active in the anti-war movement, the women's rights movement, the environmental movement and other things, but the one thing they did not do is to go into those white working class communities and explain to them how America works and how, in fact, they are oppressed and exploited and how their interests are more closely aligned with exploited and oppressed black people. And because they did not do that, white demagogues and white politicians came in and exploited white ignorance. Richard Nixon won the election because he pointed to all the rebellions that were taking place in the country during that time and said these black people, in coded language, he said these black people that are out of their place, elect me, I'll put them back in their place. He used the code phrase law and order. And so it led to his election. And after him, everybody has played by that playbook. They've gone and they've driven a wedge between white working class communities and oppressed communities of color. And they have refused to go in and to do some serious education of these communities. And it is not that it is impossible to do that. During Jesse Jackson's first run in '84, he went into those communities and got lots of support from white farmers and white workers and a lot of other people and built the Rainbow Coalition. The Black Panther Party built a coalition in Chicago where they went into an area in Chicago that was populated by what they called hillbillies, but these were people who migrated from Appalachia. These were people who flew Confederate flags. The Panthers went in there and persuaded them that they should join their Rainbow Coalition in Chicago. And so, you know, there's a documentary about it, it's great. I mean, they interview this one white guy, and he said, well, you know, we just didn't know that they didn't like these Confederate flags, but we were with the Black Panthers and we're taking them down. You know, so, I mean, it can be done. But the Democratic Party has refused to do it. They have refused to go into these communities and explain to them what their true interests are. The fact that these Republican candidates, you know, the Donald Trumps of the world who scapegoat immigrants and scapegoat other people are just using them, playing on their fears so that they can enrich a few rich billionaires. And that's fundamentally the problem. And I know that the Democratic Party will never do it. So I'm not afraid to say this, you know, and the Republican Party, they already know this. They just do it the wrong way, using the wrong messages in order to make things worse. But that fundamentally is the problem. And unfortunately, the great tragedy, you know, and Dr. Okafor mentioned the article, is that it's not just white workers who have been confused. They've been led to believe that white privilege is something that they're entitled to. And what they're voting for is always somebody who is going to ensure that they continue to have a privileged position in this society. That's what they want more than anything. And they feel like they're being eclipsed because of demographic projections and because of advances that are being made by people of color in a number of different arenas, political, social, economic, and otherwise. And so that's what drives them. But there are also people of color who also want white privilege. They don't want to be white, but they want the privilege. And so you have, you know, people who are Latinos, who are immigrants, you know, they may have lawful rights of residency and citizenship and other things. And so they believe that because they went through the process and they did what was expected of them, that now they're going to be welcomed as new white people. And so if Donald Trump is standing up for America and they regard themselves as part of it, then they too want to be part of they want to go with the winner, so they're going to vote for Donald Trump because Trump's not going to touch them, he's going to touch these other people who are trying to come in, and if they come in, then they might displace them. You know, there are only precious few spots for Latinos, and so they want them. And so they want to keep these other people out. And then you got black people who just lost their minds. I mean, they think, I mean, you know, there's no way. I mean, I know, if I live to be 200 years old, there's never any time that anybody's going to think my black behind is white. But you got all of these people who really, black people who think, you know, well, if I act a certain way, if I adopt a certain viewpoint, if I associate myself with the right people, if I'm Tim Scott and I fall down on my knees and I kiss Donald Trump's feet and I say, I love you, man, I love you. Then somehow I'm going to get white privilege just like the rest of them. Wake up, brother. You're still as black as you were when you were born.
I wanted to add, and I agree with my colleagues here, but on the agricultural issue with the white farmers, I had an experience when I was working for Congressman Conyers. This was in the 1980s when the Farm Bill came up. And the situation was that the family farmers nationwide are not represented by their political leaders in the farm states. Their political leaders represent agribusiness, the big corporate organizations. And so they are basically in conflict with the family farmers. So the family farmers were losing their land, they were going bankrupt, they were being foreclosed, they were losing their equipment. And they marched on Washington and brought their pigs and chickens and everything and turned them loose on the Congress, the congressional steps. It was quite a scene. But the only people in Congress who were supporting them was the Black Caucus, mainly Congressman Conyers, and he opened up his office to the farm organizations so they could fight for their bill. And I was assigned to be the lead person in the office to deal with the farmers. And I didn't know much about it. I had to hit the ground running trying to learn about their issues. And I attended their meetings and everything. And farmers are very honest people. I mean, they don't BS around. They're not politicians. They say whatever they think. And I found that their conditions were basically the same as our conditions in the urban areas. I mean, their homelessness, the drug situation, the violence in the family, the suicides, all the negative indicators they were suffering from. And that's fall when we had the Congressional Black Caucus. The white farmers came to the Congressional Black Caucus, and it was also the Free South Africa movement beginning. And we were having pickets at the South African embassy. The white farmers joined the black folks in picketing and getting arrested at the South African embassy. And so I saw that, and then Conyers in Michigan went up north and was campaigning for Jesse Jackson when he was running with the Rainbow Coalition. The white farmers donated, Coleman Young put out a call for support, international support for Detroit workers. The white farmers upstate, many of them were Republicans, I suppose some of them were Klan members, but they donated tons of food to Detroit workers. So I saw the possibility of alliances that can be built. In fact, I saw a license plate during that period to say, I don't know about you, but I'm voting for the nigger. Think about that. But alliances can be built if you have a serious method of doing it. And so that's something that the Trump card, not that this Trump, but always the politicians have figured out ways to raise that racial issue and destroy solidarity. But the conditions are getting so bad. I was in Idlewild during up northern Michigan in a black community during the last election, and the white folks in the forest, and this is all around Baldwin, Michigan, I mean, they are living in these broken down campers in the woods. I mean, it was totally third world, worse than third world conditions. Yet there are Trump signs everywhere. I mean, Trump badges, Trump flags, Trump toilet paper, Trump everything. And their conditions are horrible. But that's what they've been taught, that they are still better than black folks and people of color. But that has to be broken if we're going to defeat fascism in this country, because that's where we're headed. And so we have to consider, how do we build alliances if alliances are going to be built? That's one issue that I wanted to raise.
Yeah, good. Thank you. I have compiled 4 questions, but the panelists have answered pretty much all the other questions. So at this point, I'm going to hand the moment over to the audience. I presume that some of you must have been waiting for an opportunity to ask questions, so this is your moment. If you want to ask a question, raise your hand, I'll bring the mic to you.
Good afternoon. Wonderful presentation. And I'm not sure how I'm going to synthesize a question that sort of runs across many of the perspectives that I've shared. So I'm going to ask a very practical question. I want to acknowledge third-party revolutionary thought in our history, both congressionally as well as genetically. The question I'd like to ask is today, for the majority of black people that I'm closest to politically, that I want to help us be effective participants in the political process, is a very simple question. You raised earlier the number of people that did not vote. I'm interested in particular the number of black folks that did not vote. Because we have percentages of those that voted by Democratic or not. We don't have the percentage or insight into the black folks that did not vote. So I'm interested in increasing the black vote, acknowledging we're not in a perfect system, it is never going to be perfect. One of the thoughts that I had previously about how to manage this issue is to take dispirited, broken, the apathy if you will, appropriate apathy because of continued racism and abuse. I'm not saying that doesn't exist, but we still need those folks to vote. So, and the message that I thought about, I think we're living through right now, we're going to get 20%. We're at 20% now. We should be at 100%. We should be equal. We're not. It won't happen in a long time. It can get worse. We have evidence in the last 2 weeks about how things can get worse, but we still need to get a message to black folks that they need to vote, especially those that did not vote. My question to the panel is, what's the message to those people? Is it a worthy cause, and how should we approach increasing black vote? Thank you.
Well, one simple answer is that how many black people did not vote? A lot. You have Detroit, which is one of the blackest cities.
You have Detroit, which is one of the blackest cities in America. 47.2% is all that came out to vote, which means that 52.8% did not vote. Yet, the complaints from those in the city of Detroit, you would think that 110% of the people voted. You look at Atlanta, there was a great decrease in the amount of people that voted, that did not vote rather, in 2024 versus that of 2020. And this is 2 years removed from when the state of Georgia elected a black male senator to the permanent role, because he filled a seat in 2020. He ran on the 2022 ballot at midterms and got the full 6-year term. And when you have a lot of individuals that feel that their vote does not count, that's part of the problem as well. I work with a youth group in Detroit. And back in May, only 2 of the black males, because they were graduating seniors, would have been eligible to vote this past November. The rest at the time were 10th graders and lower. But in that group, not a single one of them stated they would have voted for Biden or Trump, because again, this was in May, so Vice President Kamala Harris was not in the equation. But to a T, their response is, and this is part of the issue as well, why is it that we only have 2 all white men to vote for? Now these are 14, 15, 16-year-old black kids that are representative of Grosse Pointe, Detroit, and Warren. When you have there's a phrase about you get truth from the mouth of babes. So these young people are diligent enough to understand that, is this all we have to choose from? And what's interesting is I've long advocated that the black electorate sit out an election purposely and purposeful to show both parties that if you don't come to us, then you don't get our vote. But the flip side to that is you have to make demands. And there's nothing more that bothers me from these so-called black leaders than to go to white politicians and ask them, what is your black agenda? You will never see a white person, Asian person, Middle Eastern person, Jewish person come to the black community to ask us what should be their black agenda. I mean, their agenda based on their demographic group. So the key to moving forward and changing the dynamic is for people to just become more informed. Far too many parrot and regurgitate what they've heard. I had a guy last year tell me that Project 25, his knowledge of it was based on Cliff Notes. I asked him point blank, where the hell you find Cliff Notes at? Because I'm about to cuss. That stuff does not even exist anymore. And then he went on to say, well, that's what I heard. At that point, I told him I have nothing else to say to you because you are uninformed. We cannot have an intelligent dialogue going back and forth if you go argue with me about what you heard, but you can't present facts on what you know. So become informed, and one of the other things we have to do when the issue of third party come up, people say you're wasting your vote. I voted. You had 36% of the country that did not vote. So I have that argument with them. But we also have to move forward and quit being cowards with regards to the voting process. People are too accustomed, particularly our people. We're in the mindset of being pleased by what we want to hear versus what we need to hear. Then when a black person tell you what you need to hear, oh, you just white, get the hell out of here. No, I'm trying to help you out. We are our own worst enemy. I tell people all the time, read letter from a Birmingham jail, read Dr. Martin Luther King's last book, Where Do We Go From Here? And there's a lot we can learn from that. But the most damning thing about the I Have a Dream speech, as well as the Malcolm X Ballot Ordered Bullet speech, is that both those speeches over 60 years ago can be stated today and have the same damn significance. So where have we advanced as a people that we're still relying on 60-year-old speeches to define who we are and how we move forward in the movement? So we also have to get to know our history, understand our history, and quit being haters towards one another and come together to unite. Because without unification, there's enough divide out there. Without unification, we will continue to remain lost.
Does anybody else want to add to that? Okay.
I do. Wait, I do want to add to that. I think to your question, I mean, some people in the black community, if you talk to them, they're like, we did what we were supposed to do. We did. That's why, I don't know if y'all have seen on social media, there are black women that are like, I'm done. I'm tired. I'm gonna focus on me and my family and self-care, because we did what we were supposed to do. For the rest of y'all, whatever y'all wanted to do, y'all wanted to have happen what happened, and now you get what the results are. You're competing with other countries because of the racism and sexism and classism here. You might have somebody, I don't know if anybody has seen that movie Race, about the Jesse Owens story. Just imagine if we poured in our resources, like my grandmother talked about when she graduated from high school. She got a very good high school education. She was able to go out there and get a job to support her family. We don't have that right now. Our education system, in a lot of ways, it's substandard. You know, the work I did, I worked at the Michigan Children's Law Center, and I was an advocate for children and trying to make sure that they were getting all that they needed, all the supports. We need the basics, like the good education, housing, health care. You know, we have a system that, like in other countries, Europe, other countries, I was in South Africa, they don't contaminate the food to make you sick, to just make you rely on the pharmaceutical companies to cure you. They look at the food.